those of you who know Brian, who presented last year, and if you actually want to talk to Brian, then what you need to do is read the annual report of the Congressional Budget Office produces it. It's really interesting for those of us in the room who are analysts. I mean, there's an enormous amount of assumptions that have to be made, and I've actually invited Brian to do a podcast with me on this at some point. But it doesn't paint a pretty picture. But I've asked Brian to introduce a classmate of ours who was instrumental in healthcare policy in the Obama administration. And Brian, over to you.
Yes, happy to do that. So Andy Slavitt, right here. If you can believe it, 1991, Andy and Guy and I were all section mates at business school, which is kind of frightening, dating ourselves. But this is Andy's first trip to the Berkshire Hathaway meeting. I first came here 20 years ago, but my objective in doing this introduction is to give you a sense of him, to give you a sense of how important the work is that he's done, and give you a sense of how supremely talented he is. So he's too bashful to say this stuff, but in my family, saying it and doing it are different things. This is like one of the most talented doers I know of. So came out of business school, went to McKinsey, did the conventional thing. One of his best friends had a brain tumor, died, leaving a widow who had faced medical bankruptcy. The widow and child moved into Andy's apartment. Andy, upset by this, started a company to address problems of medical bankruptcy. Okay, that's pretty cool. Sells it to United Health, largest health insurer in the United States. That's pretty good, right? Ends up taking a business there called Optum from $1 billion in revenues to $35 billion in revenues, which is pretty good, okay? So then, in the middle of that, he notices that the Obama healthcare initiative is having problems with its website. So, you know, like everyone in this room does, he calls someone in the White House and says, I can help. So because he's Andy, 3 days later, President Obama has a press conference where he announces that Andy Slavitt is going to fix the website in 5 weeks, which Andy does. He fixes the frickin' website, which now works. And then President Obama rewards Andy, by making him the head of Medicare, which is the largest department of the government, spending $1 trillion, okay? And then he leaves that, starts a venture capital firm to try to profit from all of this stuff, raises $1 billion. Biden tries to talk him back into the Biden administration to pandemic relief, but he's still at the venture capital firm. So there's not enough time for him to explain all of this stuff to you. I don't exactly know what he's going to talk to you about, but I'm hoping that the people in this room, these are really talented people in this room, understand who Andy is and try to support this guy as he does more of what he's doing. And here are 2 questions that I would be asking. I hope at some point you guys at the bar ask him. 2018, Amazon, JP Morgan, and Berkshire Hathaway, 3 of the most powerful companies in America, form a joint venture called Haven to reform healthcare. They ask this guy to run it. He says, no, it will fail. And in 2021, it fails. Why did it fail? That would be a good question. A second one is he's devoting his life now with this $1 billion fund to making profit from healthcare in a way that is not about jacking up prices and reducing opacity. It's about delivering better care, taking this excessive spending and both profiting from it and making it better. So those are 2 questions. How are you doing that? I guess it's the second question. But with that, I give you Andy Slavitt.
If you're going to say stuff like that, you can keep going. You can follow me anywhere, precede me anywhere. So I was told I needed a Warren Buffett story, and unlike Rosie, I don't really, she's got more for the both of us. But I was like, I don't have a Warren Buffett story. And then Guy and his team said, well, you do have a Warren Buffett story. What about that, that Haven Health thing? So that's not a good Warren Buffett story. I do have a Warren Buffett story, but it's not a good one. Didn't really have a happy ending. I'm like, no, tell it anyway. So I'm like, wait a minute. I'm going to come here and tell people Warren Buffett couldn't make money in healthcare, but you can? Sounds like a great theme for a speech, because that sounds credible. But of course, he can. He's right, and he was right then, as was Jeff Bezos and Jamie Dimon, that the healthcare system is horribly broken and needs to be fixed. It's expensive, it's uneven, we have lower life expectancy than virtually any part of the developed world, and it's going down. And it's going down for lots of reasons. And most people, when they need it, at a minimum, are intimidated by it, and possibly they hate it on a good day. So why couldn't he make money at it? Well, as I think he probably would tell you himself, you can't dabble in healthcare. You can't do it off the side of your desk, and it can't be someone's side project. You have to know what you're doing. And it helps if you know the system inside and out. And so I'm going to spend a few minutes trying to tell you about the system inside and out. Because Brian said, I've seen the system from a lot of different places. I've been a healthcare system CEO. I've been of a multi-billion-dollar company. I've been a policymaker in Washington. I've been an administrator that ran about 40% of the U.S. healthcare system. We spent about 25% of the federal budget. We spend $1 trillion a year. If you want to keep it simple, Rosie printed it, I spent it. Rosie, thank you. And I've been an entrepreneur, and now I've chosen to be an investor. I was involved in leading two of the most significant turnarounds in the U.S. healthcare system. One, Brian mentioned, was turning around Obamacare at its low moment, and the other was at the beginning of the Biden administration. I came in to run the COVID response when we didn't have enough vaccines for the country, and they needed somebody who could come in and do that. I've also been part, I think more interestingly for you as investors, two really interesting transformations that we're going to talk a little bit about that have just began over the last 15 years. One was a transformation to get everybody in this country covered, and we're on our way to that. The second is an even more interesting transformation, which is to change how healthcare is paid for. To change how healthcare is paid for and to change who does what. And that's a long process and a big system, but we'll spend a little bit of time on that. Okay, so why did I start Town Hall Ventures as an investment fund? Why did my wife Lana and I choose to invest the vast majority of our family savings in healthcare? And why do I feel like it's the best investment decision I could have ever possibly made? Well, let's talk about features of a pretty good investment. Here, I would rely on all of you to tell me whether or not these are good features. The first feature of a good investment appears to me to be reliable cash flow. Now, most investment opportunities, if you're lucky, if we're bragging about them, we can measure them in billions. Not healthcare. Healthcare we have to measure in trillions. Healthcare is a $7 trillion system. Over the last 10 years, $2 trillion has begun movement, $2 trillion of annual spending has moved from money that was spent by the public sector into money that's now being spent by private companies who are in search of the solutions to fix the healthcare problem. So that's reliable cash flow, I believe. And to boot, because of the changes we've made in how healthcare is paid for, we can now pay companies and they can make money by getting results, by proving that they can deliver lower cost care with better outcomes. That's how they can make profits. Totally different system. And by 2030, the majority of the healthcare system is going to work that way. From 2005, when 0% of the healthcare system worked that way. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. The second feature of a good investment is helps if you're selling something not that people want, but that people actually need. Look, my wife and I just walked through the exhibit hall over there, the boats and the net jets and the delicious candy. I loved all those products. But the most valuable thing we have, of course, the most valuable thing we possibly have is our own health and the health of our family members. Now, we may not know it until us or someone in our family starts to lose it. It's still the first time you end up in a hospital when a loved one having surgery or a kid gets diagnosed with something mysterious, that may be the first time you realize that that is the most valuable thing that we have. And it's true for the country as well. When someone, and what people want from the healthcare system, despite all of the political arguing, when you ask Americans what they want, it's surprisingly the same. People want to be able to afford to take care of their family if someone in their family needs health care. That's all they want. They don't want a handout. They don't want a complex system. They want to know that they can afford to do what's right for the family if someone gets sick, and ideally to keep them healthy. No one needs to market healthcare to you. You don't need billboards telling you, hey, go get healthcare. you will age. You will get illnesses. You will need it. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news if you didn't know that. So if that's what people want, this is a market, an investment market that should be attractive in that way. Third reason is because the degree of difficulty to do good is not that hard if you know where to look. It's really doing the basics well. In the rest of the world, we spend 2/3 of our investment in healthcare on primary care. In the US, we spend 1/3 of our investment on primary care. What does that mean? That means we spend a lot more money when people get stage 2 and stage 3 and stage 4 cancer because we didn't spend money preventing them from getting cancer. So therein lies a lot of the opportunity. So we know we have the best healthcare in the world. I know this because people say it all the time, so it must be true. But the reality is, some of us do have the best healthcare. People from around the world come to the US because we have access to the best technology, the best care, et cetera. The problem is 140 million Americans, people who live on fixed incomes or low incomes, people who live in rural America, people who are aging and lonely, low-income kids, they don't have that access. They live in communities and zip codes and have income levels that just don't allow that to happen. Might this be the place or the spark for great innovation? So that's why we founded Town Hall Ventures, because it's very much like this is a town hall. We figure if we bring it all together, we bring people together, we can find investments and create the next most innovative companies that are going to transform care by bringing the things we do well in some communities to the entire country. And that is indeed the promise. We raised our first fund in 2018. We invested in 15 companies or built from scratch. 7 of them became billion-dollar companies. 2 were IPOs. One was sold for $13 billion. One was sold for $6 billion. Another for $3.5 billion. Let me tell you what they did, because this is what's super interesting. They did things as crazy as bring more care to rural America by basically bringing in a clinic, setting up electronic visits so you can access any specialist anywhere in the country there from rural America. What did that do? It doubled the quality scores. It reduced hospital visits by 35%. It reduced medical costs. And that company is now doing quite well. What else did it do? We had a company that did something very simple. Everybody familiar with a continuous glucose monitor, a CGM? You put one on your arm, right? If someone in this room or your family members were to get diabetes or was pre-diabetic, slap on a CGM, and your phone would tell you when your sugar was getting a little bit out of control. It would help you stay healthy. Well, this is technology we have. The problem is it's technology we have, but in other parts of the country, we don't have it. So we have a company that brings continuous glucose monitors into the black community in Chicago, and guess what? It's transformed the way people live with diabetes. So I've got more examples, but I think I'm going to leave them at there, and I want to just conclude by saying this. If you ask yourself the question, where will the next iconic companies come from? Where will the next Apple come from? I would say that they'll come from places where people are solving very big problems for huge populations where there's a lot of money at stake. And so we have to ask ourselves, can innovation and private capital be part of the fix we need? The final thing I just have to say is I have to say something nice about Guy Spear. And I asked Brian and I asked others for something nice I could say about Guy.
Dig deep.
I've known Guy 33 years, and I think he's known for his wisdom, his intelligence, his folksy style, his curiosity. But I think the thing that I think of when I think about Guy is he does something better than most anybody I know, and he leads with generosity. He just puts it on the chin. He puts his chin right out there, and he leads with generosity. And I'll tell you what, that's a success formula. It's being truly generous of heart and spirit. So thank you, Guy.
Bravo. Okay, I'm gonna say one quick thing, and then we'll take a question. So the quick thing I want to say is we should all be very grateful that we have Andy, because as some of the people in this room know, I've been worried about this healthcare issue for our nation's finances for a while. I keep writing essays. That's kind of in the saying department. Then there's the doing department. And knowing Andy and knowing that there are Andys out there makes me feel better to try to fix this. But so very grateful for him. Question.
Yeah, hi there. About the U.S. Federal debt and deficit, I think most experts say it's hopeless long term. There's no solution. But there seems to be a minority of people who say that there's a high likelihood of massive deflation in healthcare costs, and that's going to save the federal budget, debt, and deficit. What do you think of that? What do you think of time frame, or even if that's a possibility?
Well, so here's the structural challenges. When we grew up, we had, what is it, Brian, keep me honest here, 4 to 5 working people for every retiree in this country.
Yes, that'd be right.
We're now soon to be crossing to the place where we will have fewer than one person.
I think we're like 1 to 2 right now.
1 to 2.
Yeah.
And at some point we'll cross. So even if you put aside everything else, the ability to pay for our care as we age is a huge structural problem, volume alone. So we have to do something. And you can't raise taxes enough, possibly to get there. You can't raise payroll taxes enough to get there. There are a couple of ponies, right? One is that for prescription drugs and for hospital visits, we pay, in the case of prescription drugs, 5 to 10 times for the same medication as every other country because we have so far refused to take a bite out of it. So there's a good guy in there that is deflationary. Hospital's a different story because we like paying more for hospitals because the hospital sector is the biggest employer in every community. We employ about 20 to 25% of the workforce, and there's kind of a wealth transfer that goes on between people who have to pay for care and those who get it, and that's a tougher political issue. I think anytime you try to take a dollar out of someone's pocket in healthcare, you have an outrageous battle on your hands. And so we don't have to ask Rosie and her successors to keep printing more and more money. We need to do some other things. What does it mean? What do we have to do? We have to change where people get care. We have to allow people to get more care at home and in communities instead of in big buildings and hospitals, or we're not going to be able to take a bite out of it. I'm not so optimistic to say that it's deflationary, but I would say that there are a lot of things that are part of our burning platform that we know how to do.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. People, please find this guy at the bar or outside or whatever it is. James.
Thank you, Brian. So I also found this incredibly interesting. Similarly to you, I'm the CEO of a tech company trying to make public transit convenient, right? I previously spent time at Uber. My biggest question for you, I guess, is given you've seen a range of companies and invested in them that are trying to help in the health sector, I've found in the transportation sector where, say, the US spends 80, 90 billion a year on pretty inconvenient transport that doesn't actually solve most people's problems. A lot of the impediments, differently to when I was at Uber, are actually getting the system to allow something that is better to spread, right? And I just am wondering if in the healthcare space you've seen any sort of principles that have worked for these private companies to actually get change to happen, whether that's like operating privately outside the system or finding a way to actually operate within the system better or whatever it is. But any advice, I guess, for or good things you've seen the best companies in your portfolio do to get through the barriers that are involved in changing such a big beast?
Well, look, as I talked about, I've managed a couple crises, and my advice for you is create a crisis. When the bridge collapsed in Minneapolis, it was fixed within a few months. During COVID, I could tell you the number of things that happened that people thought were impossible, that would never happen. Doctors were telling us for years they can't use technology, they don't like to use EMR. As soon as patients couldn't show up to their office, they figured out how to get online and see them doing telemedicine visits, or the revenue would have gone away. That happened really fast. When we also, a medical transformation and technology changed, it takes, when there's a new treatment mode, in the US healthcare system, it takes 17 years to spread, even though everyone knows it's the best evidence. During the pandemic, we learned that when we have someone in a ventilator with COVID, you're better off proning them on their stomach. As soon as that was discovered, it took literally weeks. So in a crisis mentality, the mind's focused, people can change, they can transform. We took the development of a vaccine, which is normally a 6-year process, we've got it down to months. So when we want to, we can. And I don't know what the equivalent is in transportation or in anybody's world, but we have to understand that slow-burning crises don't help us. Fast-burning crises do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. So, Andy, thank you for the compliment. I would tell you what's interesting. We have Kimberly Valentine, who's here, who's also a section mate. So you can just stand up. This is Harvard Business School class of 1993. So, but what's really interesting for me is that in the section, and I haven't seen Andy much since, it wasn't his analytical ability that stood out for me. It was his capacity to really understand people. I've said this to you, Andy, many times. And you just see what comes out when you have people who really understand people rather than things and equations and modern portfolio theory even. But Andy, thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Brian, for introducing him. So, thank you so much.